Today's guest is someone who has spent most of her life creating, long before she ever believed it could become a career. She's an artist, a creative entrepreneur, someone who once believed that doing what she loved and making money from it could not even exist at the same sentence. She didn't grow up with a blueprint. She didn't have a safety net. What she had was an obsession, intuition, and a quiet inner knowing she couldn't ignore. And today, she's here to answer a question that many creatives ask. How was the beginning of your journey as an artist until you really started making money? Let's talk about it. And yes, you may have guessed by now, but the guest today is me, Drica Lobo. I wanted to start the first episode of 2026 this way because so many creative journeys are only shared after they make sense, after the success, after the money, after the confidence. But very few people talk about the messy middle, the becoming. And I'm here to spell everything that had happened to me that made me the person that I am today. I hope this episode will inspire you to find your own path to do what you love the most, which is create. So let's start with the truth. I was an artist long before I believed I was allowed to be one. Let me explain. I was born premature with 7 months and a twin brother. We spent our first month of our life inside an incubator at a hospital, fighting for our life. We also had an older sister. She wasn't that old. She 10 months different. I was the middle child because I was born first, then my twin brother. From that perspective, you can even imagine that I was always between sides. I could never fit in, but I knew I love it to play with my imagination. I love to play with anything that I could make images of. I was also very curious. I was curious about life. I was curious about every single thing that was going on around me. My dear mother, when I was 10 years old, had this brilliant idea to put me in art school. It was an adult art school. I was the only child. It was from my hometown in São Paulo, so it was a small school. And my professor was years old, and it was so amazing to be immersive in an adult field. I felt so important. I felt so intelligent. And because I was the only 10 years old, trying to learn how to draw and how to paint, I received a lot of praise in what I was doing, which of course helped me keep going on that path. I was very active in this art school from the age of 10 and 16. I learned everything that I could possibly learn, from drawing to watercolors to oils. But let me just be clear, like, none of the art that I created back then, it wasn't my creation. It was a training. I was copying the masters, copying from different references that I had, and a lot of the paintings that I created, my mother still have it, which is a beautiful thing. And my first oil on canvas that I paint, I believe it was dated to 1993, so long. So when it was time for us to find a job and create a source of income for ourselves, my dad was Italian, so it wasn't super easy. He wanted us to start working when we were 16, and my siblings started working with him. And right at the bat, I knew it wasn't the path that I wanted to create for myself. I remember when I was a child going to the doctors, and I would see the receptionist, and I would tell my mom, like, whisper in her ear, "Mom, ever let me work between four walls." I was like 5 years old. You see how we already know what we are meant to be doing. So when we were supposed to start working and making money when we were 16, I then decided not to work for my father like my siblings did. And my mother had an idea. Why don't you start selling what you create? And I think she did that because she really wanted to help me, or maybe because she also saw how many artworks that I had collected throughout those years. So she started finding me, all of her friends from college, all of our family, every single one that she could possibly put me in contact so I could start selling my creations. And that's what I did. At the age of 16, when I started at high school, my siblings would go to work with my father, and I would stay in my room by myself creating art commissions. It was magical. Again, back then, it was a very different reality. We did not have, or not even imagine what social media would become. The only reference that I had was from my two aunts from the two sides of my family. They both named Angela, my mom's sister, my dad's sister. They were both artists, but they weren't making a living as an artist. It was a hobby. So that's what I thought. Even when I started selling my art, I thought it was just a hobby. I did not have a vision that art was an actual profession. I thought it was something that would do it for fun, even bringing some cash in. I had no idea, no references, no vision for the future. And when I was finishing high school, I had to decide to which college I would go. And I mentioned a few episodes ago, I fell in love with acting and I wanted to become a professional actress. For some reason in my mind, a painter wasn't a profession, but acting was. You see the lack of knowledge back then. Anyway, my parents didn't allow me to go to acting school. They made me believe that I needed to choose something more realistic. So I went through the journalism path, and after year 3 studying journalism, very unhappy, I finally fell in love with radio. When I started learning radio and interviewing people and talking on the microphone, I literally fell in love, honestly. And then what happened with my art? I was still making commissions. I was in college and then I started working in a radio station, and I was still doing some art, let's say 1 or 2 paintings a month, but nothing serious. I got very serious though with the journalism. I thought it was my path. I thought it was what I was born to do it. So I went all in into my journalism career. Fast forward, when I decided to move to the United States, I had no idea I would have moved here. I had a plan to learn English. That was my main goal. I moved to the United States right after I finished college. I had a visa of 1 year to go to school, go back to Brazil, and continue my life as a journalist. But I think life had other plans for me and I just followed the nudges. I remember my first year here in the United States, my brother was like, I'm going to send you all of your paintings because you have to paint. I started looking for opportunities for me here in the United States, and I live in Georgia. And I had this Brazilian day in Atlanta where you could showcase your work. So it was my very first exhibition in the United States. I had zero preparation, but I was really excited. I think it was my very official first exhibition because when I was in art school, it wasn't such a thing. After a year and a half in Atlanta, I moved to Seattle, Washington because I wanted to change scenes. I still haven't decided if I would really stay in the United States or if I would go back to Brazil. So I thought of myself, I'll just go for a year as an experiment. I start working in the service business in Brazilian steakhouses. It was a great way for me to practice what I wanted to learn so bad, which was English. When I got in Seattle, it was such a surprise for me. The only thing I knew about Seattle, it was close to the ocean. So for me, it was like good enough. I got there and it was really cold. I was placed in downtown working in this Brazilian steakhouse that was just about to open. And I started painting even more because Seattle, it is a place that breathes art. There are art galleries in every single corner, like New York, but smaller. And for me, it was magnificent. I've never seen anything like this before, not even living in Brazil. And that's when I used all of my skills. I was working in this Brazilian steakhouse, brand new. All of the walls were blank. And I offer my boss at the time if I could create some paintings of Brazilian landscapes and he could display at the restaurant. And of course, he said yes. It got me painting and I was really excited. It was a brand new thing for me. And also showcasing my artwork in a public space. Back then, Drica Lobo did not exist. My name is Adriana and my last name, Italian name, is Dallo. When I was in art school, I used to sign as my professor told me to sign your first letter name and then their last name. And that's what I always say. When you start doing the things that you are meant to be doing, all of the opportunities start falling into your lap. One of the clients from that restaurant really loved one of the paintings that I created and it was displayed there. She wanted to purchase. We were going to the same English school at a time. So she was like, I'm going to buy it from you. It was my very first sale outside of my family base. So I remember I went to college and I kind of hide that painting specific. And during the break time, I laid the canvas on the opposite side so it wouldn't caught too much attention in class. By the time I got back from the break, my professor reached out to me and she was like, do you know who painted this painting? This is so magnificent. I love art. I collect art. What else do you have? Can I see your paintings? And all of a sudden, I was a few days after that showing my professor all of my paintings, and I think she purchased 5 of them. Seattle was the place that I actually felt what it is to be a working artist for real. I'm also going to tell you another experience that I had, and maybe will get you inspired. How you can start before you are ready. Going back to the days that I was just a server at the restaurant, but one of the clients that sat on my table asked me, do you know any Brazilian artists? I am organizing an event for the Brazilian Day in Seattle, and I'm looking for a painter because we have a whole room to showcase the artist. And of course I answer, I am an artist. Then he said, how many paintings do you have? And then I asked, how many paintings do you need? Because I didn't have any, but I didn't want to lose the opportunity. Then he responds, enough to fill up the whole room, about 13 or 15. And I smiled very bright and I said to him, that's exactly how many paintings I have. When do you need by? It was a month for the event. We share contacts and all of a sudden I spent the entire month stuck in my room creating all of the 13 paintings that I needed to fill up that room that he had available. And for you to understand how big this compromise was, I used to only paint in oils. Oil paint takes forever to dry. It is a type of media that relies on different layers. Because I had to create 13 paintings in a month, I had to start painting all at the same time. And I remember I was going to school, I was working at the restaurant, and I was painting at nighttime in my room. I'm not saying this to you because I liked the struggle. On the contrary, it was the very first opportunity for me to have a solo show because I was still showcasing at the restaurant, all of the Brazilian community would know who I was. And then I started doing small projects here and there. It was pretty incredible. The only thing really negative that happened, I ended up at the hospital because with the fumes from the oils, painting for too long and having it exposed to my eyes day in and day out, I could not open my eyes for some reason. I thought it was because of my contact lenses, but it ended up being from the exposed to oil paint. Seattle is a cold place. It was not such a thing as open windows. That's why I stopped painting oils and I started experimenting with acrylics. They're completely different medias. I had to learn to paint all again. I run experiments with acrylic paintings. I did a lot of abstract paintings. When you have no idea what you're doing, you feel so much freedom to create. I then moved to California. I loved California so much but my personal life was upside down. I did not paint at all. And it was such a struggle for me not to paint because I did not know any other way to live. When I moved to LA, I started feeling less and less in love with my journalism career. I rely all of my financial resources in the restaurant business. Going back to my idea that when you start doing the things that you were meant to do, things fall into your lap. When I moved to the apartment in California, I have a split garage with my neighbor. And I remember when I first walked in, the garage on the other side of the street was a single garage. I thought to myself, I would love to have this garage and turn into my art studio. Just a thought I kept on the back of my head. After 1 year, my neighbor who had that single garage asked if we could switch garages because she got pregnant and she could not fit on that single garage. So she wanted to share garage. The same second I say, yes, of course. It was so fantastic. I united with my Brazilian community and turned that garage into an art studio. We transformed a very old garage, an ugly garage, into a bright and colorful Drica Lobo studio. Well, after I opened my art studio, a few things happened in my life. I didn't even open my studio and just made me feel so frustrated. That's when it really made me think about life and evaluate what was going on. And then I realized something really important. As much as I love it, as much as I love to paint and it was easy for me to create and to sell my art, I had no idea about business. That's when I decided to invest in my art career. I remembered it was a 6-month program for you to really know the nitty gritty of becoming a professional artist. And it was fascinating to me because everything was so new, writing an artist's statement, understanding the things that you like to paint and why. I've never thought about those deep questions. We had a lot of meditations and identity shifts because for you to become, you need to see yourself as that person. So if I wanted to become a professional artist, I had to see myself as a professional artist, not just a hobbyist artist. When I started telling every single one that I knew that I was an artist, that's when everything shifts. If you haven't listened to my previous episode about identity shifts and how it is important for anyone, you can only get in life what you think that you can get. So many people told me art wasn't a profession, that I had no vision, that I did not know what I was doing. Art was supposed to be a hobby. Like, who are you to become an artist in California? I had to trust my intuition and shut up all of the voices that said otherwise. And it's so interesting because the more someone would talk to me about how wrong that decision to become a professional artist was, it gave me more strength. This was my journey. I believe in today's world, we have more options, we more opportunities to showcase what we do. But the one thing that you cannot learn, that it needs to come within yourself, it's courage. Courage and trust in yourself. All of those years, I've never doubted how good my art was. I didn't ask for permission. I did not ask for people to love my work. I had to love it first. I've never doubted my talent. So you can learn all of the tactics. What are the strategies to become a successful artist? What are the things that you need to do to create a cohesive work? All of this is important, but the most important thing is the trust that you have in yourself. Because without you trusting in yourself, in your creations, the world not gonna see the problem. What the problem people face today, it is the analysis paralysis. There's so many different avenues that you can go that you cannot decide where to go. So if you are on this situation right now, what I have to say, you have to test. It is not because it worked for somebody that will work for you. You have to test, keep experimenting, use your creativity. We're not here to set things in stone. You are going to evolve. Your art is going to evolve. The more that you do one thing, the more your ideas will keep coming. So you have to be open to possibilities, open for experimentations. I still experimenting. We don't, and that's the beauty of being an artist, because you are set your own rules. You also have to understand and see your art business as any other business. If you have no idea where to start, start with what feels good to you. When you see successful artists in your social media, for example, go into their links and see how they actually are making money. This is a very interesting exercise that I tell to either my friends who wanted to start a business or my clients that I work with one-on-one. Again, it's not because it's working for them that's going to work for you, but you can start seeing possibilities. If you have another source of income, don't give up that yet. Not until I really understood the business side of having an art business that I gave up completely the restaurant life. All right, so this is my story. I hope it got you inspired. If you would like to work one-on-one with me, send me an email. I'm going to put in the show notes and we can talk about it. I love helping artists live by their creative gifts. I hope you love this interview with myself and you can understand where I came from and why I'm so passionate about the artist life. Bye.